You know that feeling when you walk into a room and the air just changes? When you can sense something's about to go down, something that'll make everyone choose a side. That's exactly what happened on one electric night in Las Vegas, when a man who thought he owned the world made the biggest mistake of his life. He opened his mouth. He said something that made time stop. And standing right there, just feet away, was a 21-year-old kid from Mississippi who was about to teach the entire room what real power looks like. This isn't just another Elvis story. This is the night the king became a legend for reasons that had nothing to do with his voice. Stay with me, because what happens next will make you understand why some moments in history refuse to be forgotten. The year is 1956, and Las Vegas is a different animal than what you know today. This is a city where you can perform on stage, but can't sleep in the hotel. Where you can make white people millions of dollars, but can't walk through the front door. Where you can be the most talented entertainer in the world, but if your skin is the wrong color, you're invisible the moment the spotlight goes off. Sammy Davis Jr. knows this reality, like he knows his own heartbeat. He's lived it, breathed it, and somehow managed to smile through it because that's what the world demands of him. But tonight, in a private VIP lounge at the Sands Hotel, something's about to crack wide open. Picture this scene with me. The room is thick with cigar smoke and expensive cologne. Crystal glasses catch the low light, ice cubes tinkling against glass as Vegas's elite celebrate another successful night. These are the power players, the ones who decide who performs, who gets paid, and who gets remembered. In one corner, Sammy Davis Jr. is holding court, doing what he does best, entertaining, charming, making people forget for just a moment that the world outside these walls is burning with injustice. He's mid-story, his infectious energy filling the space, when someone new enters the conversation. A businessman. Wealthy. Connected. The kind of man who's never been told no in his entire life. And he's about to say something that will echo through history. The words slice through the laughter, like a knife through silk. A racial slur. Casual. Confident. Delivered with the kind of carelessness that comes from a lifetime of privilege and zero consequences. The room doesn't just go quiet. It transforms. Every conversation dies mid-sentence. Every glass stops mid-air. Even the smoke seems to hang motionless, as if the universe itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. Sammy's smile doesn't just fade, it shatters. You can see it in his eyes, that familiar pain, that exhaustion of being reduced to a stereotype no matter how talented you are, no matter how hard you work, no matter how much money you make for people who see you as less than human. But here's where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Standing near the bar, having walked in just moments before to surprise his friend, is Elvis Presley. 21 years old. Already famous. Already the subject of controversy himself. A white boy from Mississippi singing black music and driving the older generation absolutely insane with worry about what he represents. And Elvis heard everything. Every single word. The room is watching Sammy, waiting for his reaction, probably expecting him to do what he always does, laugh it off, make a joke, keep the peace because that's what survival looks like for a black man in 1956 America. But they're not watching Elvis. Not yet. They don't see his jaw tighten. They don't see his hands curl into fists. They don't see him take that first step forward. What happens next happens fast, but in memory it unfolds in slow motion. Elvis crosses the room in long, deliberate strides. Not running. Not hesitating. Moving with the kind of purpose that makes people step back instinctively. He positions himself directly between the businessman and Sammy, and when he speaks, his voice isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's got something more powerful than volume. It's got conviction. Say that again, Elvis says, and it's not a question. It's a dare. It's a line drawn in the sand. It's a young man from the deep South telling someone with 10 times his wealth and connections that some things matter more than career, more than money, more than playing it safe. The businessman, probably for the first time in his privileged life, doesn't know what to say. He's miscalculated badly. He thought he was in a room full of people who would either agree with him or stay silent. He didn't account for Elvis Presley having a backbone made of steel. I said, say it again, Elvis repeats, taking another step closer, Because I want everyone in this room to hear exactly what kind of man you are. The temperature in the room plummets. This isn't show business anymore. This isn't networking or politics or careful career management. This is real. This is raw. This is a moment where everything could go sideways fast. Let me paint you the full picture of what's at stake here, because this isn't just about one insult in one room. This is 1956 America, where the Montgomery bus boycott is making headlines, where Emmett Till's murder is still fresh in everyone's minds, where the concept of civil rights is just beginning to catch fire in the national consciousness. For Elvis to do what he's doing right now, in this moment, with these witnesses, is career suicide according to every manager, every agent, every person who's supposed to know how the industry works. His manager, Colonel Parker, would have a heart attack if he knew this was happening. The Southern audiences that make up a huge portion of Elvis's fan base could turn on him instantly. The radio stations that play his music could blacklist him. Everything he's worked for could evaporate because he decided that friendship and basic human decency matter more than his career. But Elvis isn't thinking about any of that. Or maybe he is, and he's decided it doesn't matter. Because here's what you need to understand about the king. His relationship with black music, black culture, and black artists isn't surface level. This isn't a white kid appropriating a sound for profit. Elvis grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, in poverty that most people can't imagine. He lived in a predominantly black neighborhood. He attended the Assembly of God Church, where the music moved him in ways he couldn't explain. He soaked up blues and gospel like a sponge, not because it was trendy or profitable, but because it spoke to something deep in his soul. He credits black artists as his teachers, his inspirations, his heroes. And Sammy Davis Jr. isn't just another black entertainer to Elvis. Sammy is his friend. The businessman is backpedaling now, literally and figuratively. He's muttering something about it being a joke, about people being too sensitive, all the classic excuses of someone who's been caught revealing who they really are. But Elvis isn't having it. A joke, he says, and now his voice is rising. You think reducing a man to the color of his skin is funny? You think Sammy, who has more talent in his little finger than you have in your entire body, deserves to be talked about like that in what's supposed to be a space of respect? The room is riveted. Half the people probably agree with Elvis. The other half are terrified about the social implications of what's unfolding. But nobody moves. Nobody intervenes. Because they're watching history happen. Here's something most people don't know about Sammy Davis Jr. By 1956, he's already survived things that would break most people. He lost his eye in a car accident a couple years back. He's faced discrimination so severe that there are entire cities where he can perform but can't eat in a restaurant after the show. He's worked from the time he was 3 years old in vaudeville with his father and uncle, grinding it out in a business that chews people up and spits them out. He's developed this armor, this ability to smile through anything, to use humor as both a shield and a sword. But even Sammy's armor has limits. Even he gets tired of pretending that words don't hurt, that being treated as less than human is just part of the business. And now, in this moment, he's watching a white man his own age, someone who theoretically has everything to lose by standing up for him. Risk it all. The impact of Elvis's defense hits Sammy like a physical force. You can see it in the way he stands a little straighter. In the way his eyes, which had gone dull with familiar pain just moments ago, are now bright with something harder to define. Gratitude, yes. But also recognition. He's witnessing something rare, genuine allyship that costs the ally something. Because that's the test, isn't it? It's easy to say you support someone when it's convenient, when it makes you look good, when there's no price tag attached. It's something else entirely to stand up when it might cost you everything. The businessman makes one more attempt to save face. He appeals to the room, looking for backup, for someone else to agree that Elvis is overreacting, that he's making a mountain out of a molehill, that everyone needs to just calm down and get back to having a good time. And here's where something beautiful happens. The silence that follows his appeal is deafening. Not a single person in that room backs him up. Some of them probably share his views. Some of them probably think Elvis is being too aggressive. But in this moment, confronted with clear moral stakes, they choose silence over supporting blatant racism. It's not exactly heroic, silence never is, but it's something. It's a crack in the facade. Elvis turns back to Sammy, and his expression completely changes. The anger evaporates, replaced by something softer, concerned. "You okay, man?" he asks, and the intimacy of that question in this public space is striking. He's not performing now. He's not the Elvis Presley that teenagers scream for. He's just a friend checking on a friend. Sammy nods, and then does something unexpected. He starts to laugh. Not a fake laugh, not a deflection. A real, genuine laugh that starts in his chest and bubbles up. "Only you, he says, shaking his head. "Only you would be crazy enough to go to war in a suit that probably costs more than my car." And just like that, the tension breaks. Not completely. The businessman has already slunk out of the room, and the atmosphere is still charged, but enough that people can breathe again. What happens in the hours after this confrontation is almost as important as the confrontation itself. Word spreads. In a city built on gossip and scandal, this story travels fast. By the next morning, everyone in Vegas knows what happened. The reactions are mixed. Some people think Elvis is a hero. Some think he's a troublemaker. Some think he's naive. Some think he's brilliant. But here's what matters. The story becomes part of both men's legends. It becomes a touchstone for understanding who they really were when the cameras were off and the stakes were real. For Sammy, this moment becomes evidence that he references years later in interviews. When people accuse Elvis of appropriating Black culture, when they question whether his appreciation for Black music is genuine, Sammy is always there with this story and others like it. "I have a respect for Elvis and my friendship," he says in one interview that will be recorded for posterity. "It ain't my business what he did in private. The only thing I want to know is, was he my friend? Did I enjoy him as a performer? Did he give the world of entertainment something?" And the answer is yes on all accounts. Notice what Sammy's doing there. He's not just defending Elvis's character. He's drawing a distinction between the public persona and the private reality. He's saying that whatever else you might think about Elvis Presley, when it mattered, he showed up. The friendship between these two men deepens after this incident because nothing bonds people like going through fire together. They start spending more time together when they're both in Los Angeles. Elvis invites Sammy to his penthouse suite at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, where Sammy becomes a regular fixture at the late-night party scene. According to people who were there, Elvis and Sammy would stay up until dawn, talking about music, about life, about the weird, isolating experience of fame. They understood each other in ways that few other people could, because they both knew what it was like to be judged for things beyond their control. Elvis for revolutionizing music in ways that made older white people uncomfortable, Sammy for simply existing as a Black man in an industry and a country that didn't want him to succeed. Their friendship becomes something that confuses people who want to put everyone in neat boxes. How can a white boy from Mississippi and a Black entertainer who's faced every kind of discrimination be genuine friends? How can they look past the racial divide that defines so much of American life? The answer is simultaneously simple and profound. They see each other as human beings first. They share a language that transcends race, the language of music, of performance, of understanding what it means to have a gift and to use it to move people. And yes, they benefit from their friendship in different ways. For Elvis, Sammy's friendship is a connection to the Black musical tradition he loves so much. For Sammy, Elvis's very public defense and friendship is a form of protection and validation in an industry that constantly tries to diminish him. Fast forward to the late 60s, early 70s. Both men are at different points in their careers. Elvis is doing his Vegas residency at the International Hotel, later renamed the Las Vegas Hilton. These shows are legendary. The black leather has been replaced by increasingly elaborate jumpsuits, but the raw power of his performance is still there. And who's in the audience, night after night, whenever he's in town? Sammy Davis Jr. According to every account from people who were there, Sammy doesn't just attend these shows. He experiences them. He's jumping up and down in his chair, clapping, hollering, completely unself-conscious in his enthusiasm. After shows, he rushes backstage to grab Elvis in a huge hug, telling him how incredible he was, analyzing specific moments with the detail of a fellow craftsman who understands the technical skill behind the magic. Elvis lights up when Sammy's around. In a life increasingly isolated by fame, drugs, and the suffocating control of Colonel Parker, Sammy represents something authentic. He's a connection to a simpler time, to a version of Elvis that existed before the machinery of celebrity ground him down. "Man, I've been rocking Vegas since its neon was practically a flicker," Sammy tells reporters after one of Elvis's shows. "Never seen someone pack a 2,000-seat room like that." Coming from Sammy Davis Jr., a man who has performed for presidents and royalty, who is himself one of the most acclaimed live performers in history, that praise means something. But their relationship isn't just mutual admiration. They also have this playful, competitive edge that all great artistic friendships have. There's a story that gets told about them backstage at one of Elvis's Vegas shows. Elvis starts doing an impression of Sammy, and we're talking about Elvis Presley, who's not exactly known for his impressions, trying to capture Sammy's unique mannerisms and vocal inflections. Sammy, never one to be outdone, immediately launches into his famous Elvis impression, which he's been perfecting and performing in his own shows for years. For the next hour, these two legends trade impressions of each other, each one trying to outdo the other, both of them laughing so hard they're crying. It's a moment of pure joy, two friends who happen to be icons just being ridiculous together. There's another story, darker but equally revealing, that happens later in Elvis's Vegas run. Elvis is going through a rough patch. The pills are taking their toll. The divorce from Priscilla is tearing him apart. He's struggling with the feeling that he's become a parody of himself, performing in a gilded cage for tourists who care more about the spectacle than the music. After one show that even he knows wasn't his best, he's sitting in his dressing room, head in his hands, when Sammy walks in. No entourage. No cameras. Just Sammy. He sits down next to Elvis and says, "You know what makes you the king? It's not the voice, though God knows you've got one. It's not the moves, though those are pretty special too. It's that you give a damn. Even on a bad night, you give every single person in that room everything you've got. That matters, E. Don't forget that." According to the person who overheard this conversation, Elvis broke down crying. Because sometimes the thing we need most is for someone we respect to remind us of our own value when we can't see it ourselves. That's what real friendship looks like. Not the photo ops or the public mutual praise, but the private moments when someone sees you at your worst and chooses to reflect back your best. Let's talk about what this friendship meant in the broader context of race in America. The 50s and 60s are a battleground. The civil rights movement is forcing America to confront the gap between its ideals and its reality. Black Americans are demanding the basic rights that should have been theirs from the beginning. White Americans are split between those who support civil rights, those who violently oppose them, and a vast middle ground of people who wish everyone would stop making such a fuss. In this environment, public friendships between white and black people, especially high-profile friendships, carry political weight whether the people involved want them to or not. Elvis's friendship with Sammy, with other black musicians, with the black communities he grew up around, becomes something people analyze and debate. Some see it as evidence that he's an ally, someone who genuinely rejects racism. Others see it as a white man exploiting black culture while using black friends as shields against criticism. The truth, as usual, is more complicated than either narrative allows. Elvis is a product of his time and place, which means he carries biases and blind spots. But he's also someone whose actions, time and time again, demonstrate a genuine respect for black people and black culture. The incident with Sammy is just one example. There are others. The time he refused to perform at a venue that wouldn't let black people in the audience, the way he insisted on giving credit to the black artists who influenced him, the fact that his closest musical collaborators and friends throughout his life included many black musicians. Sammy faces his own complicated relationship with race and fame. He converts to Judaism, marries a white woman at a time when interracial marriage is still illegal in many states, and faces enormous backlash from both white and black communities for various choices he makes. He's criticized by some black activists for being too accommodating to white audiences, for not being radical enough in his support of civil rights. But Sammy's philosophy is about breaking down barriers through excellence and presence. He figures that every time he walks into a previously all-white space and commands respect through his talent, he's making the path a little wider for the people who come after him. The gift Elvis gives Sammy tells you everything you need to know about how much thought Elvis puts into their friendship. It's a black sapphire ring. Not just any ring, but one that Elvis specifically chose because, as he tells Sammy when he gives it to him, "This is the biggest black star I've seen, so I'm giving it to the biggest black star I know." Think about that for a second. Elvis takes something that racists use as a slur, the word black, and transforms it into a compliment, into a declaration of excellence. The ring becomes one of Sammy's prized possessions, something he wears constantly as a reminder of a friendship that defied the ugly racial logic of its time. There's a moment that Jerry Schilling, one of Elvis's Memphis Mafia members, describes that perfectly captures the magic these two created together. Elvis and Priscilla, Jerry and his wife Sandy, Sammy and his wife Altovice all go to see a late show together in Vegas. Afterward, they're heading up to Elvis's suite, walking through the lobby of the hotel, when they hear the opening riff of a Chuck Berry song coming from the lounge. Elvis and Sammy make eye contact, smile, and without a word, the whole group just turns and heads for the lounge instead. They grab a booth right in front of the stage, Elvis Presley and Sammy Davis Jr. just casually sitting in a nearly empty Vegas lounge at 3 in the morning. Chuck Berry spots Elvis and starts joking with him from the stage about when they were both competing for #1 on the charts. Elvis starts shouting out song requests. And then comes the perfect moment. Elvis requests Promised Land, and both he and Sammy start singing along to this song about a poor boy leaving Virginia, trying to make it to California, going clean through Mississippi. Two men from completely different racial realities, both born in the South, both intimately familiar with poverty and struggle, singing together about the American dream and the journey to chase it. That's the thing about genuine friendship. It creates these moments of transcendence where the usual rules and divisions don't apply. In that moment, in that nearly empty lounge, it's not Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, and Sammy Davis Jr., the greatest living entertainer. It's just two friends who love music, having a spontaneous, perfect night. Those are the moments both of them probably treasured most, when they could just be human beings connecting over shared passion rather than performing for the world. As the years go by, and both men's lives get more complicated, their friendship remains a constant. When Elvis is going through his divorce, dealing with his addiction, struggling with the feeling that he's lost control of his own life, Sammy is there. When Sammy faces criticism for his political choices and his personal life, when he's battling his own demons and addictions, Elvis is there. They talk on the phone late at night. They make time to see each other whenever possible. They maintain the bond that was forged that night in the Sands Hotel when a racist thought he could say whatever he wanted and learned otherwise. In interviews late in his life, Sammy is always asked about Elvis. The question often comes with an edge, an implicit challenge. What do you really think about this white man who built his career on black music? And Sammy's answer never wavers. He defends Elvis, not as a white man who deserves credit just for not being actively racist, but as a genuine friend and a genuine talent who never pretended to be something he wasn't. Early on, somebody told me that Elvis was black, Sammy says in one interview. And I said no, he's white but he's down home. And that is what it's all about. Not being black or white, it's being down home and which part of down home you come from. That phrase, down home, it's Sammy's way of identifying something deeper than race, a shared cultural experience of Southern poverty, of growing up on the margins, of understanding struggle in your bones. On a scale of 1 to 10, Sammy says in another interview, I would rate Elvis 11. From Sammy Davis Jr., that's not casual praise. That's one master craftsman acknowledging another. That's someone who's performed alongside and competed with every major entertainer of his generation, saying this one was special. And when interviewers push, when they try to get Sammy to criticize Elvis or admit that there was something problematic about their friendship, Sammy shuts it down. I have respect for Elvis and my friendship. It ain't my business what he did in private. The only thing I want to know is, was he my friend? Did I enjoy him as a performer? Did he give the world of entertainment something? And the answer is yes on all accounts. The other jazz just don't matter. The other jazz just don't matter. What a perfectly Sammy way to put it. He's saying that in the final analysis, what matters is how people treat each other in the moments when it counts. Did Elvis stand up for Sammy when someone disrespected him?
Yes.
Did Elvis show genuine appreciation for Black music and Black artists?
Yes.
Did Elvis use his platform to open doors that had been closed?
Yes.
That's what matters to Sammy. Not whether Elvis was perfect in his understanding of race. Nobody was perfect then, nobody is perfect now, but whether his actions demonstrated genuine respect and friendship. When Elvis dies in 1977, Sammy is devastated. He's lost friends before, in a life as long and full as his, you lose people constantly. But Elvis's death hits him hard. He's only 42. He should have had so much more life ahead of him. At the funeral, Sammy is one of the few non-family members who understands the magnitude of what's been lost. Not just a performer, but a person. Not just the king, but a friend. In the years after Elvis's death, whenever Sammy is asked about him, you can hear the grief that still lingers. You can hear the wish that Elvis had been able to find some peace, some way out of the trap that fame and Colonel Parker and his own demons had built around him. The story of Elvis defending Sammy that night in 1956 becomes part of both men's legacies. It gets retold at tributes, in biographies, in documentaries. Sometimes the details change, the location shifts, the exact words vary, the specific people in the room multiply or reduce. But the core of the story remains the same, because the core is true. A young white man from Mississippi, at a time and in a place where staying silent would have been the easy choice, the safe choice, the profitable choice, chose instead to stand up. He chose friendship over fear. He chose decency over comfort. And in doing so, he showed everyone watching what real character looks like. That moment matters more than any song Elvis ever sang, more than any dance move, more than any movie role. Because songs end, shows close, but the impact of treating someone with dignity when the world wants you to do otherwise, that echoes forever. That night in the Sands Hotel, Elvis wasn't performing.
He was just being.
And who he was at his core was someone who couldn't stand by while a friend was disrespected. That's not calculated. That's not strategic. That's not thinking about your image or your brand. That's just decency. Basic human decency. Which shouldn't be rare, but in 1956 America, hell, in America right now, it is. It was then, it is now, and that's why the story still resonates. Think about the courage that took. Not the physical courage, though let's be real, standing up to powerful men in a room full of witnesses could easily have turned violent. But the moral courage. The courage to risk everything you've worked for because something is wrong and you can't pretend you don't see it. Elvis could have stayed at the bar. Could have pretended he didn't hear. Could have told himself that it wasn't his fight, that Sammy was tough enough to handle it himself, that getting involved would just make things worse. Every single one of those would have been an understandable choice by the standards of his time. But Elvis didn't make the understandable choice. He made the right choice. And that difference between understandable and right, that's where character lives. The businessman who made that slur probably went on with his life. Maybe he told the story differently, made himself the victim. Maybe he learned something, though history suggests people like that rarely do. But everyone else in that room went home with a memory. A memory of Elvis Presley standing between his friend and hatred. A memory of someone with everything to lose choosing to risk it anyway. Some of them probably told their children about what they saw. Some of them probably thought about it years later when they faced their own moments of choosing between safety and doing the right thing. That's how change happens, not through grand gestures or legislation alone, but through moments when individuals decide that they can't stay silent, that some things matter more than their own comfort. For Sammy, that night represented something he'd rarely experienced: protection. Not the kind of protection you buy or the kind that comes with success, but the kind that comes from genuine friendship. Someone seeing you under attack and refusing to let it stand. In a life where he'd had to be his own shield from the time he was old enough to understand racism, Having someone else step in front of him must have been both surprising and deeply moving. It's one thing to know intellectually that someone is your friend. It's another thing entirely to see them prove it when the stakes are real. And here's what I want you to understand about the ripple effects of that moment. Every time Sammy told that story, every time someone else who was there mentioned it, it changed the listener's understanding of both men. It complicated the easy narratives. It made it harder to reduce Elvis to just the white guy who stole rock and roll from black artists. It made it harder to see Sammy as just the entertainer who is too accommodating to white people. It showed them both as complex human beings navigating an impossible system, choosing friendship and integrity when the world wanted them to choose tribal loyalty and self-preservation. This is why we tell stories. Not just to remember the past, but to imagine different futures. Every young person who hears about Elvis standing up for Sammy learns something about what friendship can be. Every person who hears about Sammy refusing to let bitterness poison his relationships despite having every reason to be bitter learns something about forgiveness and grace. Every person who hears about two men from radically different circumstances finding genuine connection learns that the barriers between us are often more permeable than we think, if we're willing to do the work of seeing each other as human first. In the decades since both men died, their friendship has been examined, analyzed, sometimes weaponized in arguments about race and culture. People use it to prove whatever point they want to make. But at its core, it's simpler than any analysis. Two men, both gifted, both complicated, both products of a deeply flawed system, chose to be friends, chose to support each other, chose to stand up for each other when it mattered. That's it. That's the whole story. Everything else is context. When you listen to Elvis sing now, knowing this story, something shifts. You hear the influence of the black gospel and blues traditions he grew up with, but you also hear something deeper, a respect, an understanding that this music he loves came from people who suffered, who persevered, who created beauty in the face of horror. And when you watch footage of Sammy performing, you see someone who refused to let the world make him smaller, who insisted on excellence as a form of resistance, who built bridges even when people on both sides told him he was wrong to try. Their friendship wasn't perfect. No friendship is. Elvis had blind spots about race, despite his genuine respect for black culture. Sammy made choices that disappointed people who wanted him to be more politically radical. But they showed up for each other consistently, in big ways and small, public and private, over more than 2 decades. In an industry built on fake relationships and calculated alliances, that's remarkable. In a country trying to tear itself apart over race, that's revolutionary. So here we are, decades later, still talking about the night a young Elvis Presley stood up for Sammy Davis Jr. in a room full of powerful people who expected him to stay silent. We're still talking about it because we need these stories. We need to know that people have made the hard choice before, that friendship across difference is possible, that courage in defense of others exists. We need these reminders that however bad things get, however divided we become, there are always people who choose connection over comfort, dignity over safety, love over fear. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you're in a room where someone says something that makes your stomach turn, where hatred or prejudice gets spoken out loud, you'll remember a 21-year-old kid from Mississippi who could have stayed silent and didn't. You'll remember that he risked everything, and in doing so, became something more than a great performer. He became a good man. And you'll ask yourself, what would Elvis do? Not the Elvis of mythology or marketing, but the real Elvis, the one who loved his friend enough to protect him. And then, maybe, you'll find the courage to do the same. That's the real legacy of that night at the Sands Hotel. Not the music, not the fame, not the performances that made them both legends. The legacy is simpler and bigger than all of that. The legacy is a reminder that we always have a choice. Stay silent or speak up. Protect ourselves or protect each other. Let hatred go unchallenged or draw a line in the sand. Elvis chose. Sammy remembered. And we're still talking about it because we're still making the same choice over and over every day of our lives. What will you choose?